The Thor series had been on a wild ride since Jason Aaron took over in the tail end of 2012. Thor fought the murderous and vengeful Gore the God Butcher and his Dark Blade All-Black the Necro Sword, formed a League of the Realms to try and stop Malekith the Dark Elf from killing everybody, and even became unworthy of his magic hammer Mjolnir when he felt he didn't have what it takes to be a god. Then, his ex-girlfriend Jane Foster took up Mjolnir to become the new Thor, battling the continued threat of Malekith, the money-grubbing Roxxon Corporation led by Were-Minotaur Dario Agger, and even the ire of Thor's grumpy dad and King of Asgard, Odin. Ultimately, Jane had to sacrifice Mjolnir to defeat the Mangog, an all-powerful god-killer that was destroying old Asgard, earning her the respect of all the Asgardians, Odin included. Meanwhile, Thor's evil brother Loki tried to be a good guy for a change, becoming the god of stories and even going undercover into Malekith's council at his guardian Queen Freya's request. On the other hand, Thor's long-lost sister Angela has mostly stayed out of Malekith's plans, focusing on her own personal journey while she can. This brings us to the year 2018, where the OG Thor is back at the forefront of his guardian ventures in politics, doing everything he can to stop Malekith from conquering all 10 realms and sending the whole universe into bloody chaos. The first issue of Thor's new ongoing series, simply titled Thor and written by Jason Aaron with art by Mike Del Mundo, establishes the new status quo. Thor is trying to retrieve the artifacts of Asgard scattered by the Mangog, but without Mjolnir, he has to rely on a bunch of weak, makeshift hammers. Asgard itself is doing okay, but refugees from the other realms are flooding into Earth, helped by Thor's allies Ross Solomon and Jane Foster. Freya is there too, and wants Thor to trust Loki despite everything that's happened. Thor's trust is put to the test when he finds Loki in his new digs. Thor immediately starts fighting Loki, but Loki promises that he can use the teleportation magic to help Thor end the War of the Realms. Before Thor can stop him, the two brothers and Thor's pet Hellhound wind up in Niflheim, the land of the dead, right in front of their other brother, Balder the Brave, new king of Hell. Meanwhile, at the end of time, All-Father Thor learns that the universe is dying around his rejuvenated Earth, and when he goes to investigate, all he finds is Wolverine, possessed by the Phoenix Force, death and life incarnate. Back in Hell, though, Thor and Loki team up with Balder and his lover Karnilla to free Hela, the rightful queen of Niflheim, and stop the invasion of the flaming fire goblins from Muspelheim, who are trying to conquer Hell from Malekith. Oh yeah, Hell and Niflheim are the same dimension, by the way, it's where the dead live. But during the fight, Thor almost drowns and has an existential crisis, but emerges stronger for it. Ultimately, Hela and Balder decide to get married to unite the disparate forces of Hell under one crown. The wedding gets interrupted by the fire goblins and their queen Cinder, though, so Thor pops over to Valhalla to get the Valkyries to help. Thanos, of all people, also pops in to break up with Hela from that brief time they were engaged, mostly so we can go screw around in another series. Anyways, the fire goblins are defeated and forced to retreat, making Hela no longer want to marry Balder. However, the wedding is still in progress, so Karnilla weds herself to Hela instead, to try and exert some positive force on Niflheim to use her in the War of the Realms. Thor, Loki, and even Balder return to Earth, where Loki secretly takes the price he asks for his help, a portrait Thor has of their mom. Thor thinks Loki took a weapon, of course, despite Loki telling him point blank that it wasn't. It's a solid opening story for this last act of Aaron's run, continuing the War of the Realms and fully re-establishing the fraught relationship between Thor and Loki. Issues 5 and 6, however, form a two-parter way off in the future with All-Father Thor, illustrated by guest artist Christian Ward, who also drew the All-Father story in Issue 1. Issue 5 features an introductory scene of Thor and Wolverine chatting before thrusting us into their battle in the far future that was teased at the end of that first issue. Wolverine is pissed that Thor brought Earth back from the dead since now it has to die all over again. Their fight is on a stupidly massive cosmic scale, with galaxies being caught in the crossfire. Their attacks even distort the panels of the comic they are fighting in. The battle doesn't get to conclude, though, since it's interrupted by the also immortal now Doctor Doom, outfitted with the supernatural powers of the Avengers, especially those from Jason Aaron's then current run of the title. Doom wants to kill the Earth for reasons, so Thor and Wolverine fight him, pounding him literally into the Earth. Then, after 100 years, Thor emerges the only survivor, victorious. Earth is safe for now. But far off in the distance, a little worm annoys the hell out of Ego the Necroplanet for 100 years, long enough that Ego surrenders and gives the worm All-Black the Necrosword. The worm, of course, is Loki. And now the end of the universe is coming for real. The two-parter reads both like a myth and a Studio Trigger anime, way more gorgeous style over substance. Although Loki killing a planet through cunning and Doom failing to kill a planet through raw strength is a great parallel and very ominous. In contrast to the previous issues, issue 7 takes place in the mid-800s with a young Thor, courtesy of guest artists Tony Moore and John Rauch. It tells the tale of how Loki tries to get Thor to leave Earth forever by making him fall in love with a human and then stay away fighting a war in another realm for long enough for his lover to die off screen. It doesn't work, of course, as his lover's death just makes Thor's attachment to Earth stronger. Issue 8 is back in the present day, illustrated again by Mike Del Mundo. Most of the issue involves Thor getting captured by the Angels of Heaven, not Christian Heaven, just another realm, so he can break Angela out of their prison, learning in the process that the Angels have sided with Malekith. Issue 9 starts off a duology of issues starring a different supporting character before War of the Realms kicks off, with issue 9 being focused on Thor's ex-girlfriend, ex-SHIELD agent Roz Solomon. Roz gets hired by Wakanda to help scout out War of the Realms related threats before they escalate. She winds up taking out a frost giant single-handedly by teleporting it to the middle of the desert where it freaking melts, learning in the process that Malekith is moving his troops by an evil version of the Bifrost. However, the issue is really about how much she's changed from an environmentalist to a hardened spy due to her experiences fighting trolls way back in Broxton, and that through line for Roz's arc is really solid. Issue 10 focuses on Odin, particularly his relationship with Thor. Odin has had slightly too much to drink when Thor shows up on Asgard, and the two get into a major fistfight. Despite Odin spending the whole issue lambasting Thor out loud, his inner monologue runs throughout the entire fight, where he lambasts himself for being such a horrible father to Thor. It's a great read, but not something that I can really do justice here, even with the images. Issue 11, then, is all set up for War of the Realms, with everything moving into place. There isn't much to talk about as a standalone issue since it's all set up, but it works great as part of a binge read. In short, Malekith rallies his armies, Jane gets cured of cancer, nice, and Thor flies into the sun to find Mjolnir. Now it's War of the Realms time. War of the Realms was Marvel's big crossover of spring 2019, featuring an eponymous 6-issue miniseries as well as a boatload of tie-ins all about the in-universe War of the Realms that Aaron's Thor run has been building towards. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to ignore the numerous tie-ins to focus on Thor in the main event. Many of them are pretty good if you want to check them out yourself. With all that said, War of the Realms issue 1 is illustrated by returning artist Russell Dauterman, who will draw the whole series, and opens with the apparent death of Odin at the hands of Malekith's assassins. Things only get worse from there as Thor is teleported to the land of giants by Malekith, so Malekith has free reign to unleash his armies on the last realm standing, Earth. The Avengers, Spider-Man, other Strays, Guardians, and even Loki try to stop Malekith's forces, but the issue ends with Loki being eaten by his father Laufey, king of the Frost Giants. Oops. The war continues in issue 2 and goes about as well as you'd expect. Malekith's armies are massacring civilians and giving the heroes a run for their money, so Doctor Strange teleports everyone to Avengers headquarters way off in the Arctic. Odin turns up alive, along with the Valkyries, but all the Valkyries are slain as Malekith takes Manhattan. The only thing left for the heroes to do is find Thor. Except for Loki, who is currently being digested. The only thing left for him to do is see his life flash before his eyes, which happens over in Thor issue 12. Loki sees his past and future selves and all the pain he's caused and will cause, including creating Malekith and killing the universe, and decides that he must die for what he's done. He's gonna have to wait though, since the Avengers are busier than he is over in War of the Realms 3. This issue is more of a bridge, plot-wise, as the Avengers split up to find Thor, destroy the Black Bifrost, and stop Malekith. They do ultimately find Thor on top of a pile of dead giants, and he's not happy. Over in Thor 13, Cole Borson's last ballad is being written in the fields of Svartalheim as he goes against his evil nature to save a bunch of innocent Dark Elf kids from the mines before being killed by Malekith's soldiers. To honor his legacy, the kids rage out from the mines and help Freya fight to destroy the Black Bifrost and cripple Malekith's armies. Freya does indeed manage to take the Black Bifrost, trapping Malekith's armies on Earth. She then sends the other members of her strike team to rally the resistance forces in the other realms. However, Freya is getting overwhelmed until Odin arrives in a suit of Iron Man armor. The two do their best, but Malekith strides in through the Black Bifrost and seemingly kills them both as soon as they reconcile their 1,000 years of animosity. Back on Earth, Thor, he's back, and he's pissed. All around Earth, war wages, and the heroes start winning. Black Panther's Dora Milaje work with Angela to push the angels out of Wakanda. Punisher leads an army of gun-toting light elves. Spider-Man leads an army of giant hell spiders. Ross finally stops Dario Agger, and Thor wreaks a storm so big that it covers the entire Earth. This issue has almost no pages that aren't splash pages in some way. It's all about the big action shots, running almost entirely on Rule of Cool. That applies to this whole event, but it really stands out here. Then, Malekith issues Thor a challenge. Face him in Svartalfheim, or Freya and Odin die. And if anyone but Thor steps into the ring, the magic will kill them. Knowing he can't stop Malekith by himself, Thor hangs himself on the World Tree, which is growing out of the sun, by the way, to figure out what to do. The answer? What if there was more than one Thor? Across the start of War of the Realms 6 and Thor 14, the Gang of Thors is assembled. Present-day Avenger Thor, All-Father Thor from the end of time, young Thor from like 800 years ago, and Jane Foster, powered up thanks to the remains of the War Thor's hammer. Oh, did I say War of the Realms 6 and Thor 14? Yeah, the two of them overlap, but War of the Realms 6 ends later, so Thor 14 goes first. Thor 14 follows young Thor, I swear he sounds like a rapper when titled like this, as he gets recruited and goes to fight Malekith. Malekith has taken Venom on as a weapon, giving himself the magic equivalent of Gorr's Necrosword from way back in Aaron's first arc, and calling himself the Butcher of Thors. Young Thor is pissed that every Thor but him has a hammer, but when Freya almost gets killed, he puts it all away to save her, proving himself worthy of lifting All-Father Thor's Mjolnir in the process. It's a great moment and a great conclusion to Thor's long-running worthiness arc. Over in War of the Realms 6, the Thors assemble and go fight Malekith, who is so excited to show off his new Butcher of Thor's form. It makes for a nice little continuity anchor for the two issues. Malekith is actually holding his own, which is more than I can say for Laufey, the last of Malekith's generals on Earth. You see, Laufey may have ate Loki, but he also ate a magic sword, which means Loki literally cuts him open from the inside and emerges victorious. Meanwhile, Thor recreates the storm of fire and ice that marked the birth of creation to freaking reforge Mjolnir, which he can lift again. Declaring himself god of the unworthy, Thor bludgeons the hell out of Malekith. He doesn't kill Malekith though, no. Malekith's own dogs do that. If you remember from Aaron's previous stuff, Malekith's dogs feed on those who feel fear. And Malekith is bloody terrified right now that everything he's worked towards has collapsed. So his dogs eat him. It's great. With the battle finally won, War of the Realms concludes with one last great moment, with Odin declaring Thor the new All-Father of Asgard. It's been a long time coming. While War of the Realms is the climax to Aaron's lengthy Thor run, there's still a little bit to go. First is an epilogue spread across Thor 15, a one-shot titled War of the Realms Omega, and Thor 16, the last issue of the ongoing Thor series. The two Thor issues see Thor grapple with his new place as All-Father and set out into the realms to actually prove himself worthy of the title while everybody else recovers after the war. Most notably, Jane takes the shape-shifting remains of the War Thor hammer and becomes the last remaining Valkyrie, while Loki takes his place as King of Jotunheim. War of the Realms Omega slightly expands on these plot points, but it's really just an advertisement for Jane and Thor's follow-up series, which I won't be covering here. Despite War of the Realms being the climax and the last Thor issues being an epilogue, Aaron's run still has an epic conclusion, as Thor 16 reminds us, in the form of King Thor, a 4-part miniseries at the end of time as All-Father Thor fights All-Butcher Loki, the Necro-God. King Thor is drawn by returning artist Asad Rabik, who drew the Gore the God Butcher story. I think the thing that most indicates that this is part of Aaron's run is the fact that it is part of the Thor Legacy numbering, issues 723 to 726 to be exact. Anyways, as Thor fights to try and stop Loki from destroying the universe, the two trade physical and emotional blows, like blowing up planets or insulting their parents' faith in each other. As the two crash on Earth, Gore the God Butcher emerges from All Black the Necrosword. Apparently, Gore's mind has been in there the whole time, but he's been at peace living in a world without gods. Now he's back and immediately starts trying to kill Thor. As the two fight, Loki reveals that he brought Gore back so Gore could kill him as in Loki, once Loki kills Thor, since Loki doesn't think he has the strength to kill himself. Thor convinces Loki to help him stop Gore, but Gore engulfs the whole universe in all black, creating the Necroverse. Ultimately, Thor has to kill the whole damn universe to stop Gore, and the only reason anything survives is because Loki sacrifices himself to reignite the sun. Unfortunately, the universe is still dying, so Thor leaves Mjolnir and Earth behind for his 3 granddaughters. Oh yeah, Thor has 3 granddaughters who all kick ass, they just really don't do anything of note ever, and then he sacrifices himself to basically rejuvenate the universe, keeping everything alive and kicking. The comic ends with the narration of Thor's past and future stories, of the stories yet to be told, and claims that the greatest stories are the ones that endure across time and never die, as those are the stories of which gods are made. It's a mostly poignant, if oddly quiet ending for the run that nevertheless captures the themes of gods and myth present throughout. And that's the end of Jason Aaron's seminal 8-year run on Thor. While this last bit of the run does not make a good starting point for new fans, it is an incredible last chapter of Aaron's saga, returning the focus to Thor, Odinson, and Malekith's War of the Realms while giving Jane, Roz, Freya, Loki, and Odin a continued presence that keeps their stories going, even though I didn't really talk about them much. Even Volstagg comes back during War of the Realms Battle of the Destroyer armor, itself last used during the early days of Jane's tenure as Thor. And of course, ending with all black both on Malekith and Gore, gives everything a nice full circle feel. This is the end of Aaron's run, the end of his Thor story. Surprisingly enough, Thor's new status quo as King of Asgard appears to be sticking around for a while, lasting through the following 4-year run by Donny Cates and continuing to all Ewing's current run. I think what makes Aaron's run stand out, aside from its length, mostly consistent ongoing plot, and incredible art, is the fact that it really feels like a myth. It's not just a superhero story, but a story about a god and what it means to be a hero. Could Thor have learned what it means to be worthy without a realm-ending war? Sure, but the war gives the whole thing a mythological scale. Same thing with Gore detonating a bomb at the end of time to kill every god throughout all of existence, and with the main god ravaging all of Asgard only being able to be defeated by being hurled into the sun, and with Loki tricking Ego into giving up his power through 100 years of whispering. The narration reflects this too, supplying grandiose prose to all the events that read like someone telling a story, explaining the grander meaning of every event and every action, so the reader knows not only what happened, but why and what it means. While this could get annoying, the narration doesn't over-explain, but instead supplements the main action as if the action is being told to the audience with the narration in mind. It even hints at future events, the Mangog and War of the Realms especially, nailing home that this is a story being told. Omnipotent City has books chronicling Thor's adventures, and Thor's granddaughters talk about the legend of the War of the Realms as a major turning point in history. Bringing up the War of the Realms in a future like this helps hype it up and make you look forward to this world-shattering event. And it really is world-shattering, with all of the spectacle you'd expect, mixed in with poignant character moments. Plus, the War of the Realms really is as important as the book says it is, not just because of its scale, but because it's the war that places Thor on the throne of Asgard, which he will rule until the end of time. It's the end of Odin's age and the beginning of Thor's, making the War of the Realms an actual and turning point in Marvel's cosmological history that will be talked about until the end of days, especially by Thor's own granddaughters. Aaron also makes great use of epithets, titles from mythology that denote the power of each god, with most real-world gods having multiple epithets that are used depending on the situation that god is in. Here, they show character growth, with Gorr's initial epithet of God Butcher turning into the God of God Butchers once he truly harnesses the Necrosword, itself almost an epithet for all black, and effectively becomes a god. Loki takes the epithet of God Butcher when he harnesses all black at the end of time, contrasting against the current Loki's more neutral epithet of God of Stories. It again helps give the whole thing an over-the-top mythological feel while emphasizing the most important traits of any given character. Throughout it all, Aaron's run really is all about Thor and what it means to be a god, what it means to be worthy. Even Jane's time as Thor reflects this, with her showing to the other gods what a mortal can be worthy through kindness and compassion, while Thor figures out his place in the universe after questioning his belief in himself in that same universe. She's a placeholder, a hero in her own right, yes, but someone who is there to protect the realms while Thor is away, with Thor taking center stage for the final battle, despite the chance that he is still not worthy of being a god. It all makes for an incredibly compelling mythological journey of character growth, questioning what it means to be a worthy god and spectacle. Lots and lots of glorious spectacle.